Yes.
Okay, we're gonna start with the budget forecast first, and what I've done here, we went over this at the finance committee in much more detail, so we're gonna do the overall summary of it. So,
Just so you know, when she said we did it in detail, it was about an hour and a half.
Yes.
Didn't you say, Mike? I mean, it was, we detailed it.
yes. The first column that we're gonna look at is the actual 2012-13 audited amounts. Then we move over to the right, as of 6/30, what the board had adopted, that budget for the 2013-14. Then moving over a little bit more to the right, we're gonna look at the 13-14 projections. This is not the budget amendment, okay, you guys, I just want you to be very clear about it. It's not the budget amendment. And then the 14-15, and this is taking into consideration lost revenue, different things that we are doing a worst-case scenario if we don't obtain certain revenue marks. This is also taking into account losing approximately 100 students. So as you can see up at the top here, we have an inflation that's staying constant at 1. Our millage staying constant at 17.9208. Here's our student count. So you can see in 12-13 we're at 2,174. The budget was built on 2,115. We actually had 2,067, and then we're looking at 100 student loss. At $7,000, that's a huge hit per student. So this is where the 7,000, down at the bottom here is our foundation allowance, and this is what our state aid payments are paid on. So we start off at $6,966, that's what we started this budget at. We're gonna be going up to $7,034 and then remaining constant for next year. So then if we go down a little bit further, we're gonna get into the revenue pieces. So looking at property taxes that were audited, we're 6.25 million. Property taxes that we were looking to adopt were 6.226 million. We have bumped it up, or it's decreased it just slightly to 6,040,000. Then looking at roughly a 3% decrease, you're looking at $5.8 million. State aid formula, what this is where we get our foundation allowance, other categoricals that come in from the state for our state aid payments. We had received $9.3 million, starting budget $8 million. Our next amount, we're looking at $8,161,000. Then next year, a decrease of down to $7.6 million. Now this had decreased down for the enrollment piece, so that's where you guys are going to see this at. State revenue, we were looking at $2,097,000, budgeted $2,068,000. We're looking at $2.2 million, and then next year a decrease of roughly $552,000, and this is only if we don't receive our MIPSR's offset. Because what's happening, I think I explained to you guys before, they increased our retirement rates almost 3%, then they're giving us this extra money each month, but then we have to pay it back the next month. So for budgeting purposes, our expenditures are increasing, our revenues are increasing, but it's just kind of a turnaround every other month. We're paying the state right back. So if we don't get that next year, that's why you see this significant decrease. Then looking at other sources, and these are funds that basically come in from poor, other contributions that we do receive, for instance, like the indirect costs that we receive from the food service fund. So we received $304,000. I decreased that down to $275,000. Looking at reducing a little bit more at $261,000. So I'm keeping it even par for next year. Again, I'm going to have the definite number for next year once we do our amendment next month. Federal sources, these are funds that come in like our title monies. So we received $1,125,000. We bumped it up to $1,167,000. We had received a little bit extra this year due to the carryover funds that we didn't utilize it last year, we're utilizing this year, $1.2 million. And then next year I'm dropping it back down to $1.2 million again. And that's looking at roughly a 5% decrease in the like our title application and things like that, just to keep us on the safe side for the time being. Transfers in, these are other revenues that are coming in from core, 141,000. We have budget 177, dropping it down just a little bit to 176. This is kind of a trending, we fluctuate year to year just a little bit and bring that down. So our total revenue base that we're looking at, we were at 19.2 million. I had dropped it down to 17,943,000. Then to roughly 18,181,000, and then next year dropping it down 7.3%, which will take us down to $16,361,000. So that's taking those other items into consideration. Now, getting into the expenditure side, what we have here are salaries and then other employee benefits, and this is going to be like the health care, the retirement, workers' comp, different costs associated with the employee body. So our salaries were $10,244,000. Looking at 13-14, we have dropped that down, and that was due to all the pay cuts, reduced days, different things like that that we've taken into account there. So we went down to $9,256,000. Kept it constant, and that, so what I'm doing here is looking at no pay increases, not going back to the existing salary schedule, everything staying even par as is right now. So if we were to just move everything over laterally. So adding in all those benefits, we had $6 million in benefits here. You have $5.4 million in benefits for a starting budget, 5.8 projected, and then going up slightly next year to $6,025,000, and that's due to some of the healthcare increases and also retirement rate increases. And you guys being educators, one thing I've stated at the finance committee, years ago, you know, retirement rates were 7-8%. Now they're topping real close to 30%, and that's on the district side of it, of what the district's physically paying. So as these costs are going up, it's not only being put on the backs of the employees paying more in, it's really being put on the districts, and that's what's really hurting us. Contracted substitutes, I kept this on here because I wanted to point this out. This is a pretty significant amount. We're looking at $264,000 is what we spent in subs last year. Now these are subs that we're subbing through PESG. These are not subs internally. So a teacher subbing for another teacher, a custodian subbing for another custodian. These are all outside substitutes. So we're just keeping it even par 265. We're hoping to reduce that down slightly next year. We have healthy bodies, have healthy employees. We'll be able to bring our costs down slightly. So our total compensation, we're looking at $16 million, brought it down to 14, almost $15 million. You're looking at projected of $15.3 million, and then next year $15.5 million. So almost a 1% increase for next year. Now here, this is where we get a little bit more detail. Now these are the pieces that are only purchase services, supplies, and others. So this has nothing to do with any of the benefits, any of the salaries. And this is broke down of each category. So instructional, we're looking at $671,000, $504,000 was our starting budget, and I kept all of these constant throughout because these are spending freezes. These are no additional purchases. These are hoping that we don't have any major catastrophes. So this is why I kept all of these at a constant rate, moving all the way across. People in instruction, we were at 121,000, went up to 282,000, and again, we're remaining constant on all of these.
Why'd that go up 160,000?
This one went up 160. Hold on.
Want me to take that one, Siobhan?
Yep, Mike, please do, because we got into this one last time. Shorten it up for me, buddy.
That column right there
I'm gonna go like this so you can
went
see
down 168,000
There
or
you go.
whatever, and then because she had to flip numbers
I had
because of
to
some
move-
new
right.
auditing things.
it. So you can see up at the top,
I
yep,
was-
that dropped by
Now, what's the simple
167,
last week?
and the bottom increased by 161.
It's all there, it's just in a different
Just
category.
Yeah.
different color.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I asked the exact same question last week, and it was.
And that got into a long
Yeah, a little long
conversation.
discussion, so.
Right, Office of the Principal, so are you square there, Scott? All right.
Okay.
Office of the Principal, we looked at 70,391, we decreased it down to 68,350. Board, Executive Administration, Fiscal Services, and that's the Superintendent, Business Office, Business Services, and the Superintendent's Office. So we're looking at 144,000, going up just slightly for 148,000, and that's due to some interest expense for our state aid note. It comes under us as part of our expenditures, so that's why it went up just slightly. Operations and maintenance, we were at 836,000, went up to 863,000, kept it right around that same amount, 866 for the following year and 867, with the cost of supplies that go up each year slightly, so we increased it just a little bit. Transportation was at 446,000, we went down to 396. Went up slightly with our aging fleet. We have some additional cost, repair parts, things like that, 435. Now, the last count you're saying, holy shnikes, how do we go up to 647? That is purchasing 2 buses. Right now, I know Butch is kind of putting Band-Aids on things and buying some used buses. This is a major cost for the district. Unfortunately, we can't lease because we put too many miles on it. Please jump in if you want to. But with, that would be, like I said, worst case scenario, we purchase 2 buses.
Excuse me,
Yes.
did you have any luck on that second bus?
First one, no. Second one is still up.
Okay. Technology, we're looking at 262,000 we spent, dropped it down just a little bit to 244. We're gonna bring it back up to 261,000 because of carryover funds. We received the money last year, but we're gonna be spending it this year. That's that technology grant that Tom was talking about. And then we're bringing it down slightly next year to 249,000. Borrowing cost, we were at 35,000, dropped it down a little bit to 30, pushed it back up to 35.5 because of the borrowing 5 million instead of 4 million with the interest rates. Community services, we're at 5,000, that's remaining pretty constant all the way throughout. Athletic department, 166,000, went up to 219,000. Now you're saying, why did we jump up on this one, right? This is because our Coach Easy used to be district employees, so they were included in the salary totals of prior year. Now they're contracted employees, so they fall under purchase services.
We'll change categories.
They change categories, yes. Other transactions, these are transfers again for our food service and also for our at-risk program. These are blended together, so it's remaining constant for the next 2 years. So summary, and this is the area that you guys probably really want to see. Looking at the total revenue, less the expenditures, here's our excess revenues, and then our projected fund balances. So we're looking at a fund balance of $1,154,000. That's what we were audited. So we have 22 days operating and then a fund balance of roughly 6%. Looking at what was adopted, revenue of 17.9 million, total expenditures 17.6. Adding to the bottom line, we were anticipating 1.4. That did not include, like with our audit adjustments, that did not include that number. So that was prior to any type of auditing that was done. So projecting, we're looking at 18,181,000, expenditures 18,160,000, adding 20,000. Looking at 1,174,000. So what I've done here is I've taken the 1.15, which is our audited fund balance, added the 20,000. That's where you come up to 1.17. Now next year, again, this is absolute worst case scenario. Revenues of 16.8 million, expenditures of 18.5 million, looking to be upside down to 1.6 million dollars. This would throw us into a negative situation, into a deficit district standing. And again, that's taking into consideration healthcare costs going up, retirement costs going up, purchase of 2 new buses, not receiving the $500,000 in MIPSR's offset, and a loss of 100 students. I mean, that's $700,000 right there. So that's a pretty significant loss if we do lose 100 students. But we have to take that into account with what has transpired here this year. So this is, go ahead, Scott.
The biggest difference between what was budgeted and what's actual is student count? I mean, that comes from a lot
Right,
of it? or-
that number,
Okay.
exactly. Because I had budgeted a loss of 60
60.
students when we lost a little bit over 100 students.
Wait till she's done with the board.
We got some statistics on this recession babies that have now just.
Yes, we do. We have a
How long does this last? I mean, is it a constant for a long period of time?
Usually you look at between 3-year and 5-year trend, that cohort, that's normally the trends that runs in. But we did have a company come in last year and do a study, I think, what was it, 10 years out, Dan? Something like that, looking at the projections.
And they weren't pretty.
No, they weren't pretty.
And it's the economy and people moving as well. The
Right.
two things combined.
And also less people having children.
Oh, with
No, the
this
average size of the family.
recessionary on babies, I just don't know how long, our birth rate declined for before it started coming back up. We don't have that figured yet.
I can get that, I don't have that on my fingertips at the moment.
But I remember about that study though, is that looking at birth rate coming up, in our area, the concern is there's not employment here to have the age-bearing parents in our area.
But, I mean, we had been doing 70 kids year, and
Right.
all of a sudden kaboom. But part of this kaboom was this recession era just hit. So that's that additional, or a lot of the additional. I just wondered how long that is going to be having a bearing on student enrollment. I realize all the other things are causing it also.
Well, I could shoot that report back out to you guys tomorrow, the cohort, the Stanford report that we have.
But when we look at that, and when we look at those numbers, this isn't a surprise to us. I mean, we knew this last year when we went through our budget process, that last year's not the only year we had to look at cuts. Now, we got hit with some things we didn't anticipate, and it's a little worse looking at what we have to do going into next year than we anticipated, but we knew we had to make cuts, and now the cuts have to be, there are probably additional things that we have to look at.
So that's this 2014-15, that's based on another 100, right?
Right, correct.
And no,
An additional 100.
and no increase in state aid.
No increase in state aid.
And,
Right.
and
So
no,
worst case scenario.
Right.
This is absolute worst case.
and no $500,000.
So if we lost 50, that was help the situation.
Right, absolutely.
It includes 2 new buses.
We kind of looked at that at the finance meeting, as if all these things didn't happen, instead of being $488,000 in the hole, we would be close to being even.
Right, even.
So-
A zero balance budget
Yeah.
is what it would be.
Can I ask a question?
So if we could
Yeah.
stem the tide on enrollment, in other words, if we could lose 60 instead of 100, which that shows, we don't buy 2 new buses, and we get the MIPSR's offset,
Correct.
and the foundational allowance goes up some, that number's still,
Still big, but not as big.
yeah,
Right, and it also doesn't include any type of best practice monies or anything like that, any additional foundation allowances in there.
Are you hearing anything on this MIPS for next year, or they're just?
I'm not hearing very good things on it right now. From the meetings I've gone to with MSD officials and when MDE was there, it's not very promising, but they obviously aren't putting anything in stone yet. So, yes, sir.
Well, I know what the problem with the birth rate, because we've been the last probably 5, 6, 7 years that we've been graduating 30 or 40 more students than we were bringing into kindergarten. So I know the smaller kindergarten classes have been working their way up through the district. how many more years are we going to be graduating 30 or 40 more students before it starts evening out to where our kindergartners are replacing, you know, that's one of the, yeah, the economy is making people leave the area, but that's a small number, but the birth rate has changed this thing in, over the last few years dramatically.
Absolutely. And I do not have that figure with me. I think that's the same thing.
We've
Jack was
had
asking.
those, Siobhan, though.
Yeah,
You-
last year.
They've been, you've been including class sizes.
Mhm.
Somebody has been, and the information that we've been getting.
Yeah.
And we're kind of going, we're going to start a skinny period about, what, next year
I was
is
gonna
at
say
the
it
high
was
school?
It was 2 or 3 years.
Well,
as of
I
last
think there
year.
was
As of
4
last
years
year.
when we looked at the high school and said we could be under like 700 kids or something like that, or
Right.
if, you know, if that carried true. Now, I don't think it was taken into account what would be coming in from St. Joe, but I also understand that St. Joe has some small classes. They kind of run right parallel with us. When we have big classes, they have big classes. When we have small classes, they have small classes. So,
Any other questions on this area? Okay, so moving into the next topic of discussion is the budget cuts. Now, I need direction from the board on this, how you guys want to do this, because this is the original list from last year, and what I've done is taken off what we implemented. Okay, so starting at the top, I don't know if you guys want to work our way down it, or what direction you guys want to go with this. You want to review it first, and we could discuss the ones that you have questions on?
well, I looked at this list, Siobhan, and some of this stuff has already been done. Number 6, restructured the senior trip.
Mhm.
We did that already. We took a day from that, and we have the seniors covering the cost of the chaperones now.
So take that one.
That was done last year for this year's senior trip. So that one caught my eye right away.
Okay,
Lighting at Ogama Heights, I thought we did that. We've redone all of the lights in the hallway because of the Consumers Energy Grant.
right, we did, but I think there was also some concern in regards to the lights that are outside, like
That was a comment
during the
about the parking
daytime.
lot
There was a
lights.
comment that was brought up about that.
Yeah, okay.
And I didn't know if there could be, timers installed or something like
Okay.
that, or we had that capability, which I don't know if you can add to that.
They're,
Sensor on
those are all done manually.
Yeah, they are done manually, but I didn't know if we had like any type of timers we can put them on, or
You know,
what there would be, okay.
We manually turn those lights on and off.
in the parking lot.
At high school.
We had comments
Yeah.
from people that came to the finance meeting that they came through Saturday and the lights in the parking lot were on.
And somebody said they were on at 10 o'clock in the morning last Thursday, or whatever day it was there, Monday, and I think it's just one of those things that I think they turn them on in the morning now, and then somebody just goes out and forgets to shut them off when the sun comes up. Because they're probably not used to doing that, because I don't know if they were turning one in the morning a month ago. I don't know, I mean,
If they're doing that, probably the timers would pay them for themselves in a year's time or less. If you're, start getting them off when they need to be, on when they need to be.
right.
It's a matter of once a week setting up a schedule, and if you gotta change some of the numbers on the timers, it's simple, and there can't be, 3 or 4 circuits out there, so you're looking at not very many timers.
So are there any of these other ones that you guys want to discuss? Want me to add to it?
I thought we were already doing computer shutdowns. I thought we were already, number 3, I thought we were already doing that as far as, I thought teachers and I thought our labs and stuff were being shut down at the end of school.
We were going to review the energy policy on this. I don't know if anyone had reviewed the energy policy on this, but I know it's in there. I just don't know exactly which section it's in. And I think it was just reiterating the importance of making sure everyone is shutting this down. Excuse me.
If you look at the, I mean, obviously with the 1.6 million, again, that's, you know, being very pessimistic. You know, we're still talking about big ticket items in terms of.
Right, yeah.
7 through 14 are
We're
big
bringing,
ticket.
we're bringing pennies up here
Right,
to,
right.
on
And
the
I-
big picture here.
Right, so I mean,
We talked about number 15, transportation. We discussed having parent-teacher conferences on the same day, and I thought that we had done that about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, and it didn't work because of something. I can't remember what it was.
I don't remember either, but I mean, it,
Lori, you're
I
looking
just-
at me
I-
with that look.
Parents couldn't get to all the conferences.
Is that what it was? Okay. I knew there was, it was something that we tried it and it didn't work.
So, like, one does it here, the other does it not, the other does it during the day, the other does it at night. You can still go to this one bus route. I think you could set that up where like, one group does it, you know, has the morning conference and say the high school has the night conference and then they switch it around the next day. And they should be able to pull this off.
You still have to run the buses so many times to take those kids home. I'm not sure, you're not gonna be able to cancel a day of school. And if they go home at 10:40 or they go home at 2:19, they still have to be taken home.
That was the reason, because we needed it for the day.
Right.
Okay.
I thought we increased cluster stops. I mean, the only thing we could look at is, I guess, more of those, but I thought we tried to bare bones that this year, didn't we, Butch?
our.
How many more?
High school.
We don't want to start getting, you know, we didn't want to get to the point of start getting dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, that was a situation we looked at last year.
You know, again, we don't want to bring up the word privatization again, but, you know, we looked at that carefully last year when it came to the custodians. Is that something that we want to look at again? Transportation piece, we didn't see the savings there that we were hoping. In the food service, you know, they are right now self-sufficient still. But do we want to go out for another bid on?
Well, what would privatizing the food service do for us? Because Richard just pointed out to me that they're their own budget and they're in the black.
It's just that
I mean,
they're self-sufficient.
we could privatize them, but we're not gonna see a difference in our budget.
Well, we would. Probably see a difference in benefits that we
The food service is a separate fund, it's no charge to the general fund, so if there's any savings, all it do is increase the fund equity in that,
Right, and
that
then they can
department.
upgrade on their equipment and buy the things that they need in the kitchen and, I mean, you are saving, obviously,
We
with
would need to.
privatizing on that. But our main
Are we
concern-
having problems now buying equipment for our food service?
If we have an oven that goes down or something that's very expensive in that manner, or one of the coolers, you know, we wouldn't be able to go out and buy a new cooler. You can't go out and buy a new convection oven. Those type of things, we can't go out and.
But what, aren't we buying those things out of the food service budget now?
Right,
If
there's
we need
one
would.
things that we are buying out of there, what I'm just saying is that we don't have a plush amount to just sit on and go out and purchase equipment necessarily that they would need, if there was need of it,
The Chartwell's bid is up this year.
which Janice and I are gonna do tomorrow.
Right, and if you recall, it was the direction of the board to bid it out both ways. One with just Janice's services and one with the entire department.
Correct.
So we will be getting that to take a look at. Does the board want us to dust off the custodial bids and recontact those companies again?
think everything's on the table. I mean, we still have to look at it. It doesn't mean anything to get a number, but we know what we're looking at.
Yeah, I think this board has to decide what it's willing to do to balance this budget. And, I mean, I have a worst-case scenario number there, and I don't know if I want to work from that specific number. I mean, that cuts deep. But, you know, I need to be realistic on what the possibility is of how much we're gonna have to cut.
Right.
And we've gotta see what that is and what we've gotta cut to get there, and then it's a balancing, which one's most important.
We're definitely gonna get the bid on the food service, that we have to do.
Well, we've still got the bids, I mean, from all the other services. We're not gonna change that much until we decide if we're actually, I mean, if we have to go down that road, and if we're willing to go down that road.
Siobhan, can you use the request for proposals you did last year? or-
No, each year.
The basic.
Right, and
Yeah.
he will change like 2 words or 3 words in it, so you have to go out and go through the whole process again.
I'm sorry, what's the?
Yeah, but this is our 5-year that we gotta rebid.
Right, for food service,
period.
but I'm talking about like custodial and
Yeah, like
transportation,
we
right?
did the request for proposals last year. You
Right.
can't just, I don't wanna say reuse them, but it's a lot of work, I guess, to.
It wouldn't be as much work because now we have everything
Okay.
in one area, it's all, you know, we have all that
There
information.
would be
there,
some
but it's-
changes probably with Rose City Middle School.
Yep.
That's true.
Those kinds of things.
And what I was just saying is, they kinda didn't know what was going on with Obamacare at that time. Now there's a little more information there.
I think anybody knows what's
Right.
going on.
Well,
Do we know yet?
a little bit of more information here.
I can contact those companies and see what it takes, you know, 8, 9 months later to put this together.
I mean, some of those bid, in fact, all of those bids were 2-year bids to begin with. So, looking at the, I mean, we could, I know this isn't exact science, but, I mean, we could almost look at the second year of the bid they gave us to at least get an idea.
Rough estimate.
Yeah, I mean, it's not gonna be their bid maybe, but it would give us some numbers to look at.
We'll pull those out and contact those people.
Now, last year, when we went through this cut process, there was a group of us that got together and went through this and got this list, and we come up with a number that we had to reach. What is going to be the process this year? I mean, is this coming out of the finance committee? Is this coming from our administration? How's it going to come to this board?
Well, I think one of the things that came up is to include the administration more in some ideas. I don't know that we included them as much as maybe we should have. So we want to get them involved and have them with their ideas. And it has to come from the board, obviously. But I think to get the ball rolling, we need to have an idea of some of the things we're going to do. And like Mike said, we're looking at a lot of things here that are going to be pennies on dollars compared to what savings may need to be. And we can, I mean, I look at it now and say, okay, if we privatized, that still doesn't even get us in the ballpark of where we may have to go. Worst
Yeah,
case scenario.
they said that that's why there's
So we're gonna have to come up with some new
They're all
ideas.
right.
And it's, I'm wondering, what committee is spearheading this, I guess?
Oh, you mean as opposed to who, like the group that looked at it last year?
Is this,
Maybe we put that same group back in.
Well,
I mean, with the ideas have all come through the finance committee after we've had the public meetings. And then Siobhan put numbers on them, you know, best we could. And,
I mean, that's what I want to know. What is the process that we want to follow? Do we want to do the same thing? Do we want to use a committee that's already there? Is this something the administration is going to give us? I like to, when I get things, I like to have a whole bunch of things and that I can pick and choose and weigh and say, well, this is, we need to keep this more than we need to keep this.
remember that original list that we've been working off of for the last couple of years was generated with those 3 meetings that we had with the community. In fact, I don't remember the date, but we had a long laundry list of things that the community put together, staff put together, and we've been working off that list really ever since. This is really what's left. And there were pages of things that.
There were over 50 items in there.
That, you know, so we whittled it down, and this is what's really left here of that process that we used a couple of years ago with the community's input on where do you want to see us make some cuts. We can run another community forum. I don't know if we need to run 3 of them necessarily, but we could run a couple more community forums again. We can talk with the building staffs and the administrators and meet with the employee groups and try to generate some additional lists of items. But this is all that's left of those, at least 50
I
items.
would be comfortable in, at this point, our administration, our building administrators and our central administration coming to whichever committee we want to handle this, whether it's the finance committee, probably the finance committee, it's money, with some recommendations. And then. Or ideas, yeah. And then from there, then we can start to maybe put dollar signs on it and then start looking at them as a board. Is there something wrong with that idea there?
I mean, you can come up with the administration with how you want to come up with this list. I mean, what protocol you want to follow, if you want to have some meetings, if you want to, you know, who do you want involved in that. I would personally like to see what we do have budgeted, so I can look at that and say, okay, have I got something budgeted here that I'd rather get rid of this and keep this? I want to see what we've got budgeted as part of it, and then just have some numbers attached to it and have a figure we've got to get to again.
I would gladly send you our budget.
I don't want that.
And I think we need to
A
concentrate.
little long, but I'll go through it line by line with you, Jack.
You know, last year, I can remember, you know, discussing for 15 minutes about $300 or something. I can't even remember what it was, but those are the kind of conversations we need to have this time around. I mean, we're talking about big ticket items, not $5 here, $8 there. I mean, we can talk about those things if we want to, but it's not going to get us to 1.6 million.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking like, say she's got 100,000 projected for some kind of technology thing we're going to do. I'm going to say, no, we can't afford that.
Right.
That's what I'm looking at, some big ticket items, and saying, I'd rather do
And
this.
we've got 2 buses in that budget. Now, I'd love to buy 2 buses. I know that Butch would love us to buy 5 buses, you know? But we're playing around with the possibility of some, you know, some used buses. And that's still out there, and I'm really fired up about that. You know, we lost that one. But, I mean, we maybe can't afford it, maybe we can't afford 2 buses next year.
Well,
I mean, we approved 2 buses a couple years ago when I was brand new to this, and I know that we needed them bad, but that was a mistake.
I mean, we can't, knowing that if that's the numbers, there's no
Yeah.
way we can go out and buy 2 new buses. Can't
Right.
spend money we don't have.
No, and not, yeah. I mean, that's half of the, that's halfway to putting us at 0 at least, you know, because we're still over by, or under by 4 or whatever, 400,000.
How many miles does that second bus have on it? Remember the second bus that you could?
The one that I talked about buying from Troy?
Yeah.
106,000.
106.
And that same vintage bus in our fleet has double that.
Do we need to put a few more bucks in that? If in the long run, I mean, if we can put off buying a $100,000 bus by buying, I mean, I know we gave you a bid of what, 4,000 last time? And we lost it to 4,500, was that what we lost it to?
It sold for 47.
So 47?
That's a big cost difference.
I mean,
Plus
there's,
10%.
Plus 10%.
There's a 10% bid auction.
Bid premium.
Bid.
Bidder's premium.
It was about 51.
years back, I think Kathy was still on board, there was a